As we count down to whether Country Garden can convert this default or not, I mean, we had all this great news about housing policies that are finally coming through. In your eyes, can it actually spark a turnaround?
I think it will take time. These measures may not necessarily address the main issue with the market, which is that homebuyers are afraid of not getting the home that they paid for. So the question is, how much incentive do you need to take that risk? And these incentives may not be enough. Confidence takes time to build.
The fact that we're seeing the rescue to the housing market at least widen a bit, do you get a sense that Beijing is ready to even rescue some of these private developers?
I think the government recognizes the significance of the Country Garden event. So if you think back to when the sector really, got knocked into crisis, it was 2 years ago around this time when Evergrande, fell into distress. And lo and behold, 2 years later, we're still here. And Country Garden is also a large developer. And the significance is that this year was supposed to be a turnaround year. And investors, home buyers, are just getting their confidence back on track. And all of a sudden, you have this big event happening. And I think the government recognized that they need to step in and try to boost the market a little bit.
There's a lot of talk about comparing those two, Evergrande and Country Garden. Mm-hmm. Can you chime in on this debate? Do you see parallels or more differences?
Well, the similarity is that both are very large developers. But when we say large, if you look at the ground floor area under construction, each of them take up about 1.4% of the entire market. So it's not particularly huge from a construction perspective. But the difference is that they're both very well-known developers, both very large. So there's a broadcast effect that impacts homebuyer confidence when they fall into distress. And this event, unfortunately, has had a negative impact on that. And homebuyers are going to take more time to get their confidence back to buy homes.
I mean, are you starting to map out these scenarios? If we do see a default of Country Garden, what would be the knock-on effects that you're going to see across the sector?
I think, unfortunately, the damage is probably already done, right? So the most important effect is homebuyers' confidence being knocked down, and that's already happened with this event. In terms of follow-on effects, so obviously we may see a negative impact on home sales, and that has a knock-on on building materials, white goods, for example.
What's your view on their liquidity situation now, though, for Country Garden?
So I think for the company itself, won't get into a lot of details, but effectively what we're seeing is in the first half results that are coming out, a lot of developers' cash levels are low. So that means that ultimately their options are going to run out in a short amount of time. So they're going to go into restructuring. And from their perspective, it probably is something that they need to do to get it behind them and focus on operations again.
We've mostly seen ratings downgrades from S&P, also in China. S&P, you had 16 downgrades versus 9 upgrades. 11 of those downgrades are actually in the high yield. Is that mostly in the property space?
Most of that is. I think this is an event that is quite unprecedented, and as such, the reflection of the stress that these issuers are facing have been come out, faster than many. And we do have to keep on top of these developments. As you know, there are many that kind of unfolds on a daily basis. So we do need to take action to let investors know what's happening and what our views are.
Do you think, does it matter if there's a certain degree of government support or even some state-backed sort of developers? Is there still that divergence that can continue in some ways, or are they also facing payment pressures as well?
I think the most important difference is that from the perspective of home buyers, when they go buy a home and they see a state-backed developer, perhaps there's less concern that they won't get the deliveries. So for most of these developers that are owned by the government, we don't actually give them credit for state support. But it does make a difference when it comes to sales, especially in crisis times like these.